The next call is a split call. Chris Farfoy, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And taloha ni. Can I begin by doing what we do in our culture, and that is acknowledging our visitors to the second of the Pacific Parliamentary Forums held here in New Zealand. Can I also acknowledge the Honourable Shane Jones, our Ambassador to the Pacific at large, as Mr Mitchell pointed out, a notable member of the Parliamentary rugby team. Can I also acknowledge someone who isn't here with us today, and that is someone that has been mentioned already, and that is the Honourable Parekura Horomia, who hosted the pōwhiri for the first Pacific Parliamentary Forum. And I think the way that he did that and the way he carried himself and also his humour really set a great tone for the success of the first forum, and we miss him on our side of the House every day. Mr Speaker, I'm very proud to be speaking in this debate, first of all as a Labour Member of Parliament, and I acknowledge my Pacific colleagues, Sir William Seal, Jenny Salesa, Carmel Sepuloni and Porter Williams, who is currently in the gallery. And I also want to take this opportunity to acknowledge two members across the hall also of Pacific origin, the Minister of Pacific People, Sam Lutuinga, and Alfred Nardo. Both, we may have some political differences with our brothers on the other side of the hall, but I know them both very well, and I know they have both have strong Pacific hearts, and in my books, that's very, very good. I welcome the delegation here because you've had the opportunity to talk about a lot of common issues that we have with the Pacific Islands, whether that be global warming, whether that be fisheries management, economic opportunities for your Pacific Islands, or governance in general. And I know that global warming has been talked about a lot, and I acknowledge the government has, in the last week, included Tokelau, the place of my parents' birth, in New Zealand's agreement to the Paris Agreement, which was signed earlier. And I just wanted to tell you a quick story about some of the advocacy around Tokelau's inclusion in that, because earlier this year, my colleague Sir William Seal hosted a meeting of Pacific leaders, and one of them there was from Tokelau, and she made a very strong and very angry case that Tokelau should be included within New Zealand's agreement. And my colleague Megan Woods was at that meeting. I was stuck at a select committee. And Megan said there's a Tokelau woman in this meeting getting very angry and telling the Labour Party that we should do more about making sure that Tokelau should be included in this agreement. And I said to Megan, can you please send me a photo? So she sent me a photo, sent it through my iPhone. I said, that's my auntie, I'm on my way. And I would like to acknowledge my Auntie Paula for her very aggressive advocacy around that, because the government saw sense and has included Tokelau within that agreement. Mr Speaker, it's not very often that we get a chance to carte blanche talk about Pacific issues, and many speakers have already spoken about the success of Pacific people within New Zealand, whether that be in the business, arts, cultural, academia field here in New Zealand. But I am going to take this opportunity to confront an issue that is an issue for the Pacific community here in New Zealand, and it's concerning our youth, and that is the increasing rate of Pacific youth suicide, because I think it's something that we should confront head on. It is an issue that is growing, and I think we need to, as a culture who has in the past not talked about mental health issues and suicide issues, need to start being much more comfortable talking about this. As a Member of Parliament for Mana, the heart of the Pacific community in Wellington, there has been far too many times as the Member of Parliament which represents the city of Porirua where I've been told about young Pacific people who have taken their own lives. And I think it happens far too often, and I think many of them are preventable. And I think it's really an obligation of all of us, for whichever Pacific Island grouping that we come from, to start talking more about mental health issues for our young people. Earlier this year, during Tokelau Language Week, it was said that only 1 in 8 can speak Tokelauan, and I think for my particular community, that means I think we've got many identity issues which our youngsters have to deal with. So they have to live in many worlds, in their New Zealand world and also in their Tokelau world. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on our young people to be able to survive in those two worlds. So I think talking about that much more often, having those difficult discussions with children, with grandparents, is something that we need to do much more often to save our young people from taking their own lives. Pacific people are about family, and those discussions need to happen to make sure our families are stronger. I wish the delegation the safest of travels home, and we look forward to our dinner with you tonight.
Speaker.
Dr.